I'm Savannah, and I'm a psychology honors student. My project is on neurotypical women's social interest in autistic women. So I'm basically looking at biases that neurotypical women have towards autistic women. So my project is looking at explicit and implicit biases. So the explicit biases has to do with the social interest. So it's somebody's willingness to befriend you or sit next to you, move next to you, start a relationship with you, that kind of thing. And so my participants will be young women who are neurotypical, and they'll be reading vignettes, little stories about hypothetical autistic women and their behaviors and conversations and stuff. And then they'll be answering questionnaires about their social interest in this character. And then for implicit biases, they'll be kind of doing this facial recognition test that I hypothesize they'll remember neurotypical women's faces better than autistic women's faces. And the faces are all randomized. They're just associated with the story of whether it's an autistic woman or a neurotypical woman. Because, the vignettes will have both types of women. So, I'll be looking at those biases and seeing what I find. I'm going to be using SONA participants, so from Psych 101 and 102. And then also just snowball sampling, social media, my friends, just anyone who's within the age range. I am going to be I'm not limiting it to women for the advertising of the study. So I'm just kind of putting it out there for any young people, and I'll be kind of sorting through gender afterwards to mainly look at women, but kind of look at men too and anyone else and see if there's any just kind of other experimental things. I have always been interested in autism for mostly personal reasons. I have autistic friends and family, and autism in women is really under-researched. It tends to be associated with men. There's a lot of stereotypes around it. When you ask somebody, what do you imagine when you imagine an autistic person? And people tend to say a young boy who's wearing headphones or that kind of thing. So there's kind of a lot of stereotypes there. So I kind of wanted to focus more on women and see how women are perceived. There is a question that explicitly asks, are you autistic? Do you identify as autistic? And then there's also another question for do you have a diagnosis? Because sometimes the act of having a diagnosis such as anxiety or depression, you'll relate more to a stigmatized group of people with mental health conditions.
How is your project different than your experience?
It's definitely a lot more exciting because it's so self-led. I feel like I have so much more control over it. So I'm doing the work because I really want to. It's less that oh, I've been assigned to do this project. I've been here from the beginning. I went to an advisor and said, I want to do a study on autism in women. And just because of that self-led nature of the project, it's just so much more interesting than most other things. There is pressure because it is a lot of work, but it's also so much less stressful and less time pressure because it's so interesting to me. I'm really enjoying it. So yeah. I do want to go into research for my career, hopefully. I've applied to experimental psych programs, so I want to continue doing research. So this feels like a really good introduction to that, the ethics and how complicated it is and all the tiny factors there are to think about that you don't tend to think about on your own. You need a lot of back and forth with people to figure them out. I think it's been kind of interesting to see what research is out there. It has been kind of surprising to ask a question and realize that there isn't a lot of research on it. Because I think especially throughout your degree, you're kind of bombarded with all this information in psychology. And when you look up all these articles, there's so much out there that you're this can't possibly be under-researched. But then the more specific and narrow your questions get, oh, there actually isn't much here. And that's been surprising. It's important to me because of the personal nature of it with the friends and family that I know who are autistic. It's also important to me because I care a lot about social justice and stigmatization. So I knew for sure, even before I knew I wanted to do my project on autism, I wanted to do something to do with biases or stigmatization or just kind of perceptions of marginalized communities. So that's been really important to me. I hope that my research can kind of lead to at least more awareness and best case scenario, I don't know, programs or interventions to help autistic women socially and that kind of thing.